Look at that.
So we're recording. So this
Yep.
is the first male interview I have ever done in my life.
Oh boy.
And Joe is probably like a professional interviewer. So I was trying not to freak myself out about that this morning because I was like, that's an interesting male to pick as the first one that you're going to interview.
Yeah, no kidding.
So this is Joe McFarland. And Joe, what do you do?
Well, my most important jobs are I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a brother. Those are
Love
the
it.
three big ones, obviously, and father of fur father, I guess is the technical term for it as well.
Yeah,
To my puppy who may make an appearance at some point throughout this.
nice.
I am the host of Calgary Today on 770 CHQR radio station, talk radio station in Calgary. Amongst many other jobs, because I side hustle like nobody's business. I am the game day host, aka the guy who runs around giving away prizes, yelling into a microphone for Calgary Stampeders and Calgary Hitmen. I also have, I'm a co-creator and co-contributor to Alberta Dugout Stories, which is a baseball-based podcast and web magazine, and I'm also a co-contributor to Canes This Week, which is a podcast based out of Lethbridge, all about the Lethbridge Hurricanes, amongst many other things.
Right? And I felt like I knew what you did, but I didn't know half of those things.
You know what, and some of it is kind of not necessarily being secretive about it, but it's just, I think people lose track of how much stuff I do, and so I don't blame you.
Yeah, there's a lot. Your schedule is full.
It's
You didn't
fun, man. I
mention
mean, it's full, but it's also manageable, which is always the
yes.
key at the end of it. It's so.
And I personally think full can be a very good thing. I don't like how people will say busy is like a badge of honor, but if it's all things we enjoy, then it doesn't feel like it's overwhelming, right?
They always say is if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, and I actually do agree with that. I mean, I get to do radio. I get to talk for a living. I mean, that's not a bad thing.
Yes. Okay, I have to preface this next one with that Joe and I went to middle school together, and that's how we know each other. And looking back at that, I would have never thought that you were going to talk for a living. Not that you were a quiet guy, but you weren't like the guy that was always talking either. Like, it's just so interesting what we become when we're older.
Yeah, and I think it really shows how you can find something that you enjoy later on in life. And it's funny, when I look back on it, I actually had a grade 3 teacher, Leslie Bertram was her name. And at the age of 42, she decided to up and quit teaching and go into a completely other line of work. And it's funny, the little lessons that I learned along the way, like in junior high and high school with you, was you kind of roll with the punches a little bit, right? Like, you don't need to be married to one thing. And I do a lot of talks at high schools and that kind of thing. And
Yes.
one of the things I always tell them is, don't feel like you need to figure out your life by the age of 18, because in theory, you're gonna have another 80 years left to figure it all out. I'm 37 and I feel like I'm just getting started. So why is it that we need to be putting pressure on young kids to be figuring out their lives and figuring out what they want to do for a living and all that fun stuff, when it's invariably going to change twice or 3 times? I just got lucky that by the age of 20, I found something that I was deeply passionate about.
I believe that is lucky too, personally, because I think we don't even truly know ourselves at 18, let alone, I don't know if we do at 37 right now. Who knows? We evolve and we grow and we change, and there's no shame in changing those things. I think sometimes people stick with a job too long because they think they should and they need to, and that's the proper thing to do. And I just don't agree with that. I was having this conversation with my son who's 12, and he was talking about what he's going to do in university. And I was like, whoa, pump the brakes. You're 12. We don't know what you're going to want to do. We're going to like figure these things out as we go. And it was just fascinating him starting junior high this year and feeling the pressure that he had to figure it out. And it was like, no, we got lots of time for that. You don't need to figure that out right now. Try all different things.
Yeah, and I think the other part of it too is it comes from our parents and our grandparents, right? And the aspect of life expectancy is one that really fascinates me that way. Is when you look at how long we're going to be spending on this planet compared to what our great grandparents did. And so this is why I think that there's a massive shakeup in education coming before too long. And the belief, I have a firm belief in lifelong learning,
Yes.
for that very reason, right? Is that at some point down the line, I may have to change lines of work. I've said it a few times. Is, one day my boss is going to walk into the on-air studio and say, yeah, that was not a good show. Here's your box. See you later. And I'm going to say, well, it's a good run. And now it's time to go learn something else or go find another radio gig or whatever the case may be. But I try not to take any of what I have for granted, but also of the understanding that it could also be taken away from me at any given time. So it's important for us to realize that we're on this planet for a long, long time, and we should take advantage of those opportunities that do come up.
I think, yes, absolutely. And I think sometimes we need to embrace those pivots into it is the path that we're meant to be on. I truly believe that even if it doesn't make sense at the time, and with all of the health scares that are going on right now, I think there's a lot of people that are going to be reflecting on, I was talking to somebody yesterday just about how she's so sad that she can't go to work because she absolutely loves what she does and how beautiful that is. But then her husband is still having to go to work right now. Right. And how he hates his job every single day. And I was like, oh, that's such a hard way to live. I can't imagine waking up and going to something that I hated every day, or that didn't bring me joy or light me up or get me excited.
Yeah, and it's interesting is, again, like I got really lucky in finding something that I really, really enjoy. And that wasn't where I was starting when I came out of high school, to be honest. And just to share a little bit of a brief story on this one is,
please.
I took a year off from high school to kind of, it was to make a little bit of money so I wouldn't have to work when I was in post-sec. And then I went into accounting. I was really good with math, and I was like, well, this makes sense. And so I went to the University of Lethbridge for accounting for a year. And I came across a buddy by the name of Cam Thompson, who in English 1900, because I took a bunch of classes to boost my GPA more than anything else, because accounting sucked, to be brutally honest. I went into it thinking, okay, it's going to be a bunch of math. Yeah. It wasn't. I didn't deal with a bunch of numbers in that first year. In fact, it was all theory of micro and macroeconomics, which bored me to tears.
I took 6 months of accounting as well.
But what did I do? Like, you have all these other filler classes, and instead of taking ones that made sense with my line of work, I was like, history of rock and roll, cool, I'm taking that. Music theory, because I knew that it would be a GPA booster. I took English 1900 because I knew it was a GPA booster. And I came across his pal, his name was Cam Thompson. He started asking me about NFL. I was like, okay. After a couple of weeks, I'm like, man, this guy must be betting off of what I'm telling him. Because I thought, why are you asking me all these questions? Finally, he fesses up and he says, actually, I've got this radio show. And at the time, I'm listening to AM radio in Calgary. I'm like, you don't have a radio show. You're full of, And he goes, no, it's at the university, to which I had no idea that the university had a radio station. So he takes me down there. I also realized in the fine print that every year you're paying $3 per year per semester to keep this radio station alive, which is important why you read the fine print on all of your tuition and stuff.
Yeah.
So I go down there, and by the end of the semester, he actually asked me on his show. And then by the end of the semester, I was guesting on more shows on that station than I was actually going to class. And I was like, okay, that's clearly, I found my path, right? And it's, sometimes you have to, I was 20 when that happened. And so I got really lucky that way versus, some people go into their 40s or 50s and still don't find that. So
can I pause you for a second? I want to just give you kudos on that, because I think some people would have had that opportunity, but went, that's not logical. I need to stay on this accounting path.
Well, and from a money perspective, my bank account is sitting there going, that was the dumbest decision you've ever made.
Yes.
But again, to me, it's about quality of life and quality, because your life is 24 hours a day. And if you're upset with, if you're upset with 8 hours of your day, that's a third of your life that you're not happy with.
Yes.
Context is so important to me. And that's why, it's so inspiring to me to see so many different people who are kind of breaking through that cycle of got to do that 9-to-5 thing, and they're doing stuff that they actually enjoy. And to your point, I hope that through all of this, as we're trying to figure out what the heck is going on in this new world, I I hope everybody takes that step back and realizes, yeah, life is short, but life is long. Let's try to take full advantage of this and maybe try to enjoy it a little bit more.
Yes, I love that. And I think it is an opportunity for us to embrace that side of it, as much as there is some scare and fear of the unknown and uncertainty and all of those things. Absolutely. But this is a really cool opportunity for us to just figure out what does make us feel good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think the other aspect of this is, and again, I'm not trying to downplay the severity of what's going on.
Me either. Yes.
I love playing long game. I'm a big believer in legacy. I always have been. It's funny, is I always joked about how, especially with my side gigs with the Hitmen, with the Flames, Roughnecks, Stampeders, is I always wanted to tell my kids at some point that I'd be cool. I was cool once.
Yeah.
Right. And so I never really thought of that as legacy, but now I do. And it's funny to think that. And so I think when you look longer term in this, once we all do, which I do believe we are all going to come away from this coronavirus thing, we'll actually be able to kind of take a step back and realize, hey, we need to stop and smell the roses. Hey, we need to do some of these things, because everybody's having to calm down a little bit. Everybody's having to take that step back, take that breather, spend time with family, all those kinds of things that I think we kind of lost because of the hubbub and the hustle and bustle of the day-to-day.
Yes, I totally agree. I think it is just an opportunity for us to slow our nervous systems down, to be honest. I think we're so overstimulated on the regular, and so many of the clients that I work with, I will suggest that they spend an hour just hanging out, maybe just sitting on the couch, maybe doing nothing. And it is the most uncomfortable activity for them to do, because they are beautifully overachievers and very successful in many things that they do. But we have to be able to calm that down within ourselves too. And I think that just helps us grow faster if we can learn to slow down, right? And be where our 2 feet are.
And it's amazing to me, and I've been reading a lot more into the mental health side of things and inner peace side of things and that kind of thing. And it's amazing to me, is in this world of opportunity in which we have, which is, we are ever connected. I mean, you and I are having a conversation. Granted, it's not across the world, but it's, it feels across the world when you drive that sometimes.
Yeah.
But we are capable of having that conversation. The possibilities are endless. And I think, especially as we come out of coronavirus or anything else, is, the times are going to suck, but also we've never had as much opportunity as we've had currently with e-commerce and everything else that's going around. And I, again, keep going back to, when we go through this and we come out on the other side, people are still going to need services. People are still going to need goods. People are still going to need businesses. And a lot of these are going to have to start from scratch. You're not going to have that same equity that you had, pre-coronavirus, but it's still capable of being built up and scaled up pretty quickly if you do it right.
I think so too. And I think it's really important for us to realize that we're all in the same boat. And so, I was talking to somebody that is extremely successful the other day, that owns many businesses and investments and all of the things, and on paper, amazing, tons of assets. But their bills are $100,000 a month.
Right.
Just flat out, without any extras. And the fear that is there to not be able to pay those bills is the same as the person that is fearful of the $100 that they don't have. And so I think this is also an opportunity for us to just realize that we are all human, and it doesn't matter how high we've put somebody on a pedestal because of their net worth. We're still the same. And if we can just embrace that with each other and just love on each other a little extra, I think, right now, and just we're all doing the best that we can with what we know. And I've seen a lot of yucky slung around the internet right now, with people shaming other people for doing things. And let's just try not to judge everybody. Everybody's doing the best that they can. Let's try to educate ourselves. Let's, have our people that we go to that we trust, and we trust the information or news or whatever that looks like for everybody, and go from there. But let's not judge and shame each other. Let's just embrace each other a little bit more right now.
on the flip side of that, you see the negative side, but you know what I've seen a lot of lately is a lot of positivity and a lot of gratitude towards uh, groups of people that they didn't necessarily have before. And particularly, I'm looking at the healthcare sector, because here in this province, particularly, there's been a bit of a demonization of the public sector lately, especially with budgets, et cetera, the price of oil going down, yada, yada. And I think people are starting to realize that there's value in everyone, whether it is your truck driver getting the goods to the grocery store worker who is getting everything out onto the shelves. There's so many different pieces to the puzzle, and I think we're starting to finally start to. I shouldn't say everybody, because I don't think everybody's getting it yet, but I think that there is a large number of people who are starting to understand that we all have a role to play in this world, and so it's up to us to celebrate that and to understand and sympathize that not my line of work isn't for everybody, much the same as the grocery store workers or mechanic or anything else. And so you got to be grateful for all of the roles that all the different people play.
I totally agree. I think it's really, we've had cool conversations in our household of how far back our gratitude can go for the food that is in our fridge right now. And just, like, we probably weren't thinking that way as clearly as we should have been a few weeks ago, or taking those little things for granted of that the shelves are full at the grocery store, or who is doing that, and that they're still going to work this week. Like, thank you. Truly thank you, because I'm sure they're a little bit afraid to do that right now too, and I appreciate what they are doing.
And I'm glad as well that my wife is a teacher, and so the teachers are starting to see a little bit of love as well, because I think there are a lot of parents a week in who are saying, teachers, you deserve $1 million for putting up with the hellions that you have, right? It's funny, and I think, again, it's a little eye-opening for some people, just the different things that people provide on a day-to-day service that I think maybe we take for granted sometimes.
Yeah. I think it is just like a great time for us to truly appreciate everybody that comes across in our world and not take those things for granted, for sure. I saw a funny meme I have to share that said, I've homeschooled one day, I would like this child transferred out of my class. And so it is just a whole new appreciation for teachers and all that they do every single day.
And again, this isn't an either or proposition, right? Like, again, I go back, and I know that especially the oil field and the energy industry here in this province or anywhere else, whether it's hydro in Ontario or whatever the case may be, there's this us versus them mentality. And I'm truly hopeful that we do come to a point, and I don't know if it's going to be because of this or whatever, but I am truly hopeful that we start to understand that we're all in this together, whether it's in health or in wealth or happiness. And so we should be cheering each other on. I'm a firm believer that you don't need to tear anybody else's empire down to build yours up. Yeah. And so, celebrate those who are able to build theirs up, and hopefully they'll celebrate you building yours up too.
And this is exactly why I asked to interview you, because you always share this on, not always, I shouldn't say, but whenever I see a post come across social media from Joe, it always is such a fair look at things. You don't take sides, you just state the facts, and you're so just fair about everything that you share and shedding light on all of the things, and in a positive manner, and still getting the information out there. And I so much appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. I know some people view that as being like bland and being, Miss America-esque, but I'm a firm believer that kindness wins the day, right? And you can, it's amazing to me is how, especially in today's day and age, there seems to be this belief out there that, you either need to be a fiscal conservative or a fiscal liberal, and it's one or the other, right? And that's fair. But just because you're a fiscal conservative doesn't mean you have to be an a-hole as well, right? Like there's a line, right? Like I don't even like calling myself a fiscal conservative anymore. I call myself a fiscal responsibilitarian, which I know is not a word, but I'm taking.
I love it.
And I'm a social libertarian. Like, you do you, and it doesn't affect me, right?
It doesn't have to.
You love wholeheartedly. Who am I to judge, right? And little things like that. I think we really got divided on needlessly, whether it's the geopolitical side of things or just the fact that everybody's got this platform on social media now. And I think it maybe, again, it boils down to having this opportunity now to kind of take that deep breath and go, okay, what's really important in my life?
Yeah.
Right. And that's what, again, happiness is the ultimate goal, is it not?
It is. I don't think you realize that all my programs have the word happy in them, but
Mm-hmm.
they do. And that's like my number one go-to of like, we could just all use a little more happy in our lives. It's just,
And it
there's,
starts from gratitude, right? Like it
yeah,
comes from a place of understanding the place in which we live. And I'm the first one to say is I have it super easy. I am a white, straight man in Canada.
yeah.
Like I won the genetic lottery.
Yes.
Right? Like as weird as that sounds, but I realize that if I take any of those things away, that I am part of a group that is going to be not as on solid footing as I am currently. And
Yeah.
so it'd be wrong for me with this platform that I've been given through being part of quote unquote the media. And I hate using that term, but as someone who is in the media,
Yeah.
it would be irresponsible of me not to take advantage of it and to spread what I believe is the greater common good for everybody.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful way of looking at it, of it's actually selfish not to share
Mm.
in that way.
The only way I heard a saying a while ago, and it was the only way that you can be selfless is by being selfish. And I
Yes.
think both ways as well, right? And so
Yes.
to have that understanding and to really soak that one in, really kind of, again, and I know I sound Miss America-esque, but at the same time, there are some very valid points in what is said when you actually dig down deep into some of those nice things to say.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think it's important for us to, selfish can have such a negative connotation for so many people. And if you really get down to it, it's not. It's selfish is not a negative. And we need to just kind of embrace that it's okay to be selfish as long as you're a good person. That's
Yeah.
the difference. It's being a kind, loving human and being selfish towards yourself too. And that's how we help other people, truly, I believe.
And again, like to your point about that is being selfish in your pursuit of happiness is what is eventually going to make other people around you happy, right? Like, because if you're a miserable person to be around, people aren't going to want to be around you. And so you need to figure out what is making you happy and then scale up on it.
Yes, I agree. So a few years ago, my husband said to me, I had anxiety quite high at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a regular day in our house and it was a Sunday. And he said to me, do you realize none of us want to be around you when you're like this? And it was like a knife to the gut. It was the hardest. And he said it from love. Like he wasn't saying it angrily or meaning to be hurtful. Like he was truly trying to help me. And it was such an eye-opening moment for me that I will never, ever forget. And it led me to the path of being extremely selfish for myself for the next couple of years to figure out my own self. I had to truly connect in with who I was again, because I was just on this race of like, do more, be the best at this, do all these things. I want to be successful in this. I want to have a clean house. I want to raise my kids the best. And it was all getting lost in there. It was with good intention, but it wasn't what the important shit was. And so I really had to figure that out. And by figuring that out, I had to be selfish of taking some time for me to figure those things out.
Well, and it's interesting you mentioned the word best, and how do you define best?
Right?
Like, because what you're doing is what subconsciously you're doing is comparing yourself to everybody else. Right.
And who am I comparing
a
to?
really bad thing to get yourself into, right? Like, I don't care about material things, to never have, never will. I don't compare myself to my best friends and how they handle their kids or how they handle their relationships or anything else like that. The only thing that I can be accountable for is myself, and compare myself to how I am every day. And if my wife and I get into an argument, which doesn't happen all that often, then I go, okay, how do I make it so that it's better for tomorrow?
Yeah.
so that it's one of my favorite sayings, and it's from a music magazine with Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. And he said, you're only as good as your next album. And I thought, I subconsciously, again, one of those things that I never really thought about until lately
Yeah.
is, yeah, you're only as good as your next app. You're only as good as your next day. You're only as good as your next show. And in a relationship form, for example, I always say is I'm only as good as how I can be tomorrow. And so how am I going to be to my wife? How am I going to be to my puppy? How am I going to be to my unborn child? And make sure that I take that into context. I don't care about what anyone else thinks about
And that is why you will be a legacy.
it. I hope so. Truly, the only legacy I hope I leave behind is one that people feel like, from a radio show perspective, is I want people to think that when they're turning on my show, they're getting informed. When it comes to my friendships and my relationships, is yeah, I would go to bat for them, or for Joe, and because I know Joe will go to bat for me. And for my unborn child and children, maybe down the road, is I hope that I instill some of my values in them so that they can make the world a better place down the road. And and it's interesting, like even from a workplace perspective, I was a manager before I was a talk show host, as the news director. So as the guy who's kind of running things behind the scenes. And I prided myself on making sure that my employees knew that I had their back.
Mhm.
And I knew that I had struck a chord. Like I always tried to buffer them from upper management. I always answered to them before answering up to my managers.
Amazing.
And it's something that's really taken for granted, I think, nowadays, is that managers feel like they need to answer up, whereas I always felt you answer down, and then eventually those above you will be like, well, everybody seems happy, right? And so, and it really hit ahead for me really later on. I had an employee come up to me and he says, can I take you aside? And he was handing in his 2 or 3 weeks because he's moving back home to Manitoba. He's got tears in his eyes and he says, Joe, I'd go to war for you. And I was like, that I've done my job, right? Like I've done everything I possibly can for this guy.
Yeah.
And that meant the world to me. And that to me, that's legacy. And legacy is going to be different for everyone.
Absolutely.
Right? That's the other part of it, is my legacy is going to be different from your legacy, is going to be different from my wife's legacy. And as long as you're able to define it for yourself, that's all that matters.
Yes. And maybe that should be homework for whoever's listening to this, of what is your legacy, like figuring that out. I think that's something that could be taught in school more so, just your own values and figuring out what is really important to you. I think that is something that we kind of fluff over sometimes. And that's really important in life.
Well, yeah, and you've defined it, right? Like you've nailed it down to one word by the sounds of it. It's happiness, right? For you, that is what you want your legacy to be.
Yeah.
So it might be one word, it might be one sentence, it might be your own manifesto, whatever the case may be. Identify that for yourself, right? And that'd be my main message for anybody.
I love it. We didn't plan to go this way, and I just love how it came out that way.
I talk for a living, Jen. Come on.
I know. That was perfect, actually. Okay, so I have a couple of quick questions before we wrap up. I would like you to share what you think is the most common myth about media, broadcasting, whatever word we want to put on that. What is something that you would love to just be like, I kibosh this. This is not actually true.
Oh God, there's just so many, especially nowadays, given that it's become the most demonized. Like we're trusted about as much as politicians now, which is a great place to be. The one thing that I always go back to, and I think is at the root of all of this, is that the easy out, the lazy term is the media. The media is always used when you disagree with something. And so there's this belief that the media is all left, or the media is all right if you happen to be on the left or the right, or whatever the case may be. There's this weird belief out there that we're all conspiring in that, and or beyond that is, as a talk show host, the number of times people are like, oh, you're just getting told what to say by Justin Trudeau because he's giving you $600 million. I'm like, Well, number one, broadcasters are not eligible for the money. Number two, if we were eligible for the money, I wouldn't take it because nobody tells me what I can and can't say on the radio. Well, to a certain extent, because I'm not allowed to swear yet,
Yeah.
because I've got a farmer's mouth. And number three, I think out of all of that is every opinion that I have on the radio is my own. And there's this weird belief that management has this trickle down effect and tells us how to think. And even and on the flip side of that, there's this belief that because I'm married to a teacher, that I am a union apologist. Like, no, these are opinions that I have formed based off of years of being a reporter, as a journalist, and having an interest in public education because, oh yeah, I'm an actual product of said public education.
Yes.
So yeah, like this whole belief that there's some conspiracy is just weird.
I love it. I love that we're identifying that because I think there is a lot of that floating around.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed it a lot more last week, and now I notice this week people like clinging to any sort of news that's positive.
Yeah.
It's like, look at how far you swung the other way in a week. That's pretty amazing. Okay, this one's a little bit more fun.
Yep.
If you could have a billboard put up today, not that many of us are driving around anymore, but you know what I mean,
Yep.
and anything is on it, what would you put on it and why?
Am I allowed to swear on it?
100%. Can we use like the dollar sign for S's and so that it's not as aggressive?
I had to laugh a little bit. There was Adam Legg, who was with the Business Council of Alberta, put out a tweet basically thanking every group imaginable, like we did earlier on with grocery store workers and healthcare workers and all that kind of thing. And especially in today's day and age, I quote tweeted him on it, and I said, gratitude, spread that stuff everywhere. Ultimately, I would say gratitude, spread that shit everywhere. Yeah. But it's the same message, right? Like, again, gratitude, happiness, all of those kinds of things are intermingled. And if that were my main message, if I only had like 4 or 5 words, that'd probably be it. And put up a face that's much prettier than mine.
I love it. We're having Wacky Hair Day at home, and I was going to tease you about how you can't do Wacky Hair Day today because you keep it all bicked down.
Truth be told, I actually shaved bright and early this morning because I went to kiss my wife last night, and she does this whole, ew. I grown like a 3 o'clock shadow in about 8 days. So I still grow facial hair like I was 16, which is awful, except for this bad boy here. It's the only place it grows. Well, I get the 5 o'clock shadow around, and I've got the cul-de-sac full in effect. So I got lucky. I actually did this for charity way back when it was 2007, 2008. And I decided to auction off the rights to shave my head during an intermission at a Medicine Hat Tigers game for the Alzheimer's Society in Medicine Hat. And it was like $2,000 that we raised. It wasn't anything too crazy, but my girlfriend at the time actually said, you know, it actually kind of suits you. And I realized that my head, is fairly round and doesn't look awful. And so it's been my calling card for now over a decade.
Has it been that long? I think that's awesome.
Yeah, 2000. Yeah, it would have been about late. Oh, maybe a little bit later. It would have been 2008, 2009, I guess, would have been when I first picked it. And I was like, yeah, let's keep it this way, because I knew it was getting thinner and thinner on the top and bad medicine. So I mean, it's the
you
cool
do have
thing
the right shape of head. Like, it just suits you well. That's what it is.
The round bobble head. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That'll come up next. Since you're from Calgary, we'll make a Joe bobblehead for all of us.
That's the true legacy right there. If you've got a bobblehead, then you're in. Then you're in.
That's right. I appreciate you coming on so much today, Joe, and sharing so much light. And I really appreciate, as a male, how you stand up and chat fully. And I feel like you embrace feelings. Not that all males don't, but I feel like it is uncomfortable for some men still, because there is that conditioning over time that doesn't speak strength to them. And so I just encourage every single male in my life to share all their feelings all the time. It still is very masculine, I promise. And I appreciate that about you very much. So thank
Well,
you.
and I appreciate the opportunity to have this platform to be able to talk about it as well. And I'll share one little story more with
Yeah.
you on that front. And it was fascinating. Again, another one of those chats that I had at high school for Career Week. And it was a bunch of boys, of course, that were, because you sign up for, you know, you can go see a police officer or whatever the case may be. And obviously when you attach radio host and sports guy in a bunch of the boys, and in this particular school, hockey is a big thing there.
Yeah.
And so I had probably 40 or 45 kids in the class, and 42 of them were boys. And none of them wanted to ask questions, because I always do like a 10-minute, here's who I am, here's what I do, here's my day to day. And then I'm like, I want to provide as much value for you, so you ask me as many questions as possible. And this particular class this year, because I've done it at that same school about 3 or 4 years in a row now,
Cool.
they, not one question. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm just going to riff for a while until the bell rings. And I got into the topic of kindness, and I got into the topic of, yeah, you can be the greatest athlete in the world, but if you're a dick in the locker room, nobody's going to appreciate you, and you're not going to go very far. I've seen kids' careers derailed in junior hockey because their dad thinks that they deserve all the playing time or that kind of thing. And it was amazing to me after I had this talk and talked about how, you know, I can teach, again, being a manager, I can teach talent. I can't teach attitude. The teacher came up to me afterwards and says, thank you. Like, it's one thing for me as a female teacher to say these kind of things. It's another for a guy to come up in a position of power or a position of influence, say, hey, this is what really matters. And again, to kind of make this conversation all go full circle, is we, I think, are starting to realize, whether it's from a business perspective or from a personal perspective, is happiness is the end game of it. And a productive worker is a happy worker, and a happy worker is a productive worker. So I'm grateful to have this opportunity and this platform to be able to utilize. And so I'm thankful for you for reaching out and asking me to riff on it for a while.
I love it. I so much appreciate it. And maybe we'll do it again in the future. We'll just keep talking about all these things. We'll
Sounds
just
wonderful.
start our own. That sounds awesome.